When you have a tight or achy muscle, you might think that that's the first thing you want to be stretching. But actually, it's usually the last thing that you want to be stretching, as in order of operations. So today's video, I'm going to share with you two stories that illustrate why that should be the last thing you stretch on your list instead of the first, and how to incorporate that into your self-care routine so that you get the most benefit. Welcome back. My name is Catherine. I'm the founder and principal therapist of LSM Clinic, a sport and remedial massage therapy clinic in East London. In this channel, I talk about body care, taking care of your muscles so that you can enjoy your favorite activities and live your life as close to pain-free as possible. So with stretching, there are a lot of things that we can look at, like how to stretch, what the stretch reflexes, etc. But often one of the things that people don't realize is the order of stretching you do can give you a really different outcome. So I've got two client stories for you about releasing muscles and how if we had released the tightest thing first, we would not have gotten the information we did. And then I'm going to explain to you how you can apply this to your own stretching, to your own tight or achy muscles. Okay, so one story is neck and shoulders and one story is legs. So we're going to start with the legs, but I will try to make sure that there's timestamps if you just want to jump through any of the sections. So I had a client come in, and this is probably over a decade ago, and he was a hurdler, and he had pulled his hamstring, or thought he pulled his hamstring because his hamstring was really achy and he had restricted movement in it. So what we did in the session is I had him test his forward bend. Now, one of the things you always want to do whenever you're stretching is test before and after. I've done a video on that, so I'll link that in the description below. But basically, it helps you see how effective you really are. So for his hamstring, we did a forward bend. Now, he's very flexible. So the first time we did a forward bend, he could go to 90 degrees before he felt his hamstring was tight, before he felt that pull. So what did I do first? I did the quad, okay? Because opposites. So I released the quad, and then I had him get up and retest. And believe it or not, he could actually go further. So this time he could get his hands to the ground before he felt his hamstring. And then the next thing I did was the IT band. So we did an ITB release on the leg where the hamstring was bothering him, and we retested again. And amazingly, he could get his nose to his knees. Now remember, I said he was unnaturally flexible. This is not like, I don't want to say unnaturally, but like this is not like a normal range of flexibility. So don't be like aiming to be able to get your face to your nose or feel like you're not flexible. This was just this person's range of movement. So he could get his nose to his knee and didn't feel anything in the hamstring. So from that, I'm like, okay, your hamstring is being irritated partially by your quad muscle and partially by tight IT band / vastus lateralis, which is the quad on the outside of the leg. And then, of course, I did his hamstring. Now, I genuinely can't remember if I did the piriformis, and piriformis is pretty important for tight hamstrings, so I probably would have. So I may have done the piriformis and retested, but I don't remember. But what I definitely remember is that the last thing I did, when he had great range, he could get his nose to his knee, his hamstring felt loads better. I released his hamstring. I did a good job on it. There was definitely some tension in the body of the muscle, but if you've ever seen me in person, I'm not like into mauling muscles or anything like that. So it wasn't like crazy pressure. Got a nice release on the bodies of the hamstring. Then he retested, and he could only go to 90 degrees again, and he could feel that. Now, of course, it is possible that it was feeling a little worked on, but given that I hadn't done like a crazy amount of work and just like enough to release it, I don't think that's what it was. But what that showed us is that to really take pressure off of his hamstring, the quad and the IT band were both important pieces in his hamstring feeling irritated, right? But if we had done the hamstring first, if we'd released the hamstring first and then done the other ones, it would have been very easy to think, oh, it's just getting better because it's responding to the hamstring release that we did. Okay, so that's one story. Second story is a client who had a massive knot on the top of his shoulders. And again, this was like probably about 12 or 13 years ago. I tell you these stories because this is how I started to develop my theory of working with the body, because there was a lot of like testing and assessing, and like very few people were talking about this at that time. And from what I can see, not a lot of people are talking about this now. But anyway, it was like 12 or 13 years ago. He had a massive knot on the top of his shoulder. And he said he came in that it was a 9 out of 10. Really, really painful. Now, I worked on the pecs, and his pecs were some of the tightest pecs I'd ever seen. And after I released the pecs, I did quite a bit of work on them because I was mindful that they were so tight, but I didn't want to overdo it. Did a lot of work. He got up, and his pain in that knot on the top of his shoulder, which was like base of the neck, top of the shoulder, went down from a 9 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10. So it was significantly better. At this point, I had not touched the muscle on the top of his shoulder. Then I worked on the back. I worked between the shoulder blades, I worked on the rotator cuff, the infraspinatus, and of course, I got into that knot that was on the top of the shoulder. Now again, I don't work really aggressively. I work with the muscle, I sink in, I let the muscle open. So the muscle responded really well, got a good release. It felt a lot softer, still had some tension there because it was quite a big muscle, or quite a big knot, I should say. Got him up, retested, and the pain had gone up to a 6 or a 7. So it went from decreasing by 5 when we opened up his chest to increasing back up to a 6 or a 7 when I released this. Now, I can probably go into more detail about the balance of tension and like how working on them is different, but that's not so relevant to why I'm telling you these stories in this video. So the reason that I'm telling you these stories is because often when we have a pain, we think we need to release or stretch where the pain is first. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you don't want to do that. And actually, it should be the last thing that you release or stretch, depending if you're like doing foam rolling or if you're stretching it. So number one, a lot of the time where we feel the pain is not the cause of the problem. I do have like a metaphor video on that, so I will put that in the description below if you want to watch it. But often when something is irritated, it is irritated because there's something else out of balance that is either pulling on it and irritating it, or that it's compensating for. So if you can do the thing that's irritating it, then you can take pressure off the muscle and the muscle is not as irritated. So with the example of the neck and shoulder story that I told you, often when our chest is really tight and it's pulling everything forward, the back of our body is having to clench against that pull to try and like keep us in balance. So when we remove that pull, that muscle can relax, which is why the muscle relaxes and you feel better. But then there's still tension, right? Because, there was so much tension in the chest when I worked on this guy. And for most of us, the tension that our body is responding to is old. It's built up for a while. Sometimes the tissue is actually shortened. So then when we do a release on the back, the balance of tensions is still that the front is more, and then the back is like, oh, well, now I'm not as tight, so I have to work harder to pull up against it. So when you're stretching or releasing a muscle that is irritating you, if you do the opposite muscle first, right? So opposite can be front to back, it can be side to side, then retest, then you can see if the muscle that is opposite is one of the things that's irritating it. And then if you do the muscle that is being irritated or that is in pain or that's achy, you can notice, oh, did that make the muscle feel worse or did that make the muscle feel better? Because like in the case of the hamstring story that I showed you, I told this guy, you need to not stretch your hamstrings too much and really focus on releasing your quads and your IT band, because that's what made the most difference in helping your hamstring, right? The other thing is sometimes when muscles are pulled and overworked and like really overstretched because of things pulling on them or just because they're irritated, stretching or releasing them or putting pressure on them can actually make them more prone to injury because they're already being stretched. They're already being irritated. And so, especially if you don't stretch gently, especially if you think like a good stretch is a strong stretch, that can really irritate the muscle and make it more likely to get a tear or to be irritated. Now, I'm not saying that you should never stretch a tight muscle, and I'll go more into that in the video that talks about when you should stretch and when you shouldn't stretch. But by doing the opposite muscle first, then you can see what kind of improvement it makes, and maybe you don't actually need to stretch that muscle at all. The other thing that you can think about, and this is especially helpful if you've worked with a practitioner, like when people come into our clinic, we will test after we do things, which shows us how much each thing is. Like with the hamstring guy, we did the quad, then we did the IT band, and then we did the hamstring. So we saw how much each changed it. If the IT band hadn't done anything to help the hamstring, then I wouldn't have told him to work on the IT band. So if you go and see someone, or if you come and see us and we release a couple of muscles and retest, then we can tell you, okay, when this muscle is irritated, make sure you retest these things. But in general, things you can look for is the opposite, complementary muscles, muscles higher and lower on the chain. So for example, with the hamstring, it's a really good idea to release the piriformis. If your lower back hurts, it's a really good idea to release the hip flexor and the piriformis. If the top of your shoulder or between your shoulder blades hurts, it's a good idea to release your chest and your lats and usually your neck muscles and look at your breathing. So when you need to stretch a muscle that is irritated or achy or annoying you, make sure that it is the last muscle that you stretch and that you test in between. And that will help you know going forward if you should be stretching the muscle that's irritated or if you should actually be stretching the muscles around it or opposite to it. Now, if you'd like help with either releasing your IT band because you have hamstring problems, or maybe you actually have tight, IT band vastus lateralis knees, or if you have neck and shoulder pain and you'd like to know how you can open your chest, I do have 2 free resources that are workshops that you can download for immediate access. One is a foam rolling workshop, and pain-free foam rolling, by the way, shows you how to foam roll painlessly and effectively, and a desk worker workshop, which shows you a chest stretch that can help open up your chest. So if either of those things are things that you would like help with, feel free to try those. And I would love to know if you do have a muscle that's achy and you stretch the opposite one and then retest that achy muscle, did it make a difference or not? And if you're not sure how to stretch, I have lots of videos on stretching, so I'll put down below, and I've got a new playlist that I'm making about how to stretch effectively and how to make sure you're stretching effectively. So those links will be in the bottom. So thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind liking this video and sharing it with someone who might be interested in how to stretch more effectively for them, I would really appreciate it. And if you'd like to get emails with our videos and other tips, you can subscribe to my email list by using a link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.